You're listening to WRHU. I'm John Santucci. We're joined right now by New York Governor David Paterson. Governor Paterson will be making his campaign official this Saturday here at Hofstra and joins us now to talk about his campaign. Hello, Governor.
Well, hello, John. How are you? Nice to talk to you.
Very well. Good to speak with you, Governor. Things have been very tough in Albany. We all know that. And I guess the first question is, have you actually enjoyed being governor?
It isn't many times that I get to enjoy it, but I think what I enjoy is the privilege to actually serve in this capacity. I mean, I just think about the governors I knew when I was growing up, and the idea that I became one of them is something I don't think I've totally gotten over, but it's a thrill, really. Even though every single thing has been difficult, we've had the Federal Reserve saving Bear Stearns the day I came in office, and most of the fiscal problems occurring in the months thereafter.
If Eliot Spitzer had not resigned, though, do you think you ever would have been governor? Would you have ever actually run for the job?
I don't think it ever would have happened. I certainly knew at the time that I came into office that Hillary Clinton was running for president, that at that point she was the odds-on favorite to win the Democratic nomination and probably the presidency at that point. I thought that since the governor had selected me to be his lieutenant governor, that he might fill the vacancy by appointing me to the Senate, and I think people would have understood because he picked me before, and then it would have given him another choice for lieutenant governor. And, you know, in my mind, I wanted to be prepared in case that happened. I was probably more prepared than what happened on March 10th, 2008, when they came in my office right as I was beginning to eat lunch and told me this story, the end of which is, get ready, in an hour, you're going to be governor.
A little bit of a shock there, huh?
It was. Thankfully, the announcement didn't come, and I had a few more days to prepare myself. Not nearly enough time, I must say.
Well, let's talk about some of the issues right now. If someone was to log on to your campaign website, you list the issues facing New York. Number one is, and you have it listed as such, the economy. There's a huge budget gap right now. New Yorkers, of course, finding it very difficult to live in the Empire State. What will Governor Paterson do as opposed to a Rick Lazio or, say, even an Andrew Cuomo? What will you do to get New York back into fiscal shape?
Well, I think that in spite of the fact that the number one issue is the economy, that you have to look past the economy and know that at some point we're going to have some kind of recovery. And when that recovery comes, we're going to need to create jobs that compete with the other states in the 21st century. And the major area where I think New York has an edge is energy. Even when we came into office, Governor Pataki had us 3 times the national average in conversion of electricity traditional sources to clean, renewable energy sources. And so what I have posed is a challenge to the state to transpose 45% of our electric use from traditional fuels to clean and renewable energy and energy efficiency. This would yield 50,000 jobs in the state. We also are working in the areas of broadband, information services, and biotech. These are other places that we can create jobs. The advanced battery technology, that is what would power the hybrid electronic vehicles. These plug-in vehicles will be probably the new wave of automobiles in this country, but they can only run for about 2 hours. Whoever expands the use of sodium and makes those batteries run for a couple of days the way it would if it had a tank of gas will command and replenish their economies for certainly for a few decades.
But, Governor, all good plans, but the problem is, though, New Yorkers look at that and say, all right, there is a plan, but when am I going to see the effects of this plan?
Well, you know, in some respects, the effects of the plan are starting to occur now. We've got Geico expanding from Tonawanda to Amherst up in Erie County. We have brought Yahoo into this state. We have expanded by 1,000 jobs. Canon, right out on Long Island, on the Nassau-Suffolk sort of border, exit 48 on the LIE, really more into Suffolk at that point. And we've got a lot of things going on, but the recession has cost New York so many jobs that you can't see the progress yet until you see the raised revenues that will hopefully end the recession. But we are prepared for that eventuality. And what we're trying to do to expedite that is not to add on to any more costs by bringing in late budgets, by bringing in budgets that have phony revenues that don't really close the deficit, or by borrowing or taxing. And so this budget this year has been rated by all the budget rating agencies, the Citizens Budget Commission and others, as that kind of budget that will accomplish that. We're going to have to tighten our belts. It's going to be a little tough, but the one thing that we're going to practice in New York as a government is what so many families are practicing right now. You can't spend money that you don't have. And if you notice, ever since I put the budget out, you see all these press conferences. Oh, we have to restore education. We have to restore health care. We have to restore this and that. Everybody's restoring, but no one is explaining how to close the budget deficit with real and recurring revenue reductions.
That might be, that is so, Governor. I do agree with you there. But the problem is that nonetheless, and you've said it countless times, if you tell someone you're taking away funding from their health care, they're still going to be annoyed by it. Kemp Hannon, who is the former chair of the Senate Health Care Committee, we spoke to him yesterday, and he said to us, quote, if patients on Long Island feel the devastating effects on health care caused by the proposed cuts of $45 million to hospitals, along with steep cuts to nursing homes and home care, the results will be unacceptable and unimaginable, end quote. Of course, he is referencing the proposed cuts you've announced, a lot of them hitting the North Shore LIJ health system, about $10 million leaving the Manhasset hospital, which is, of course, the biggest one. How do you make people feel a little more comfortable about something like that?
You don't. You have to tell them straight up the situation you're in. People who were going down on the Titanic said it was unacceptable, but there wasn't anything they could do about it. There is something we can do about it. We can make these reductions and tighten our belts. Now, if you're going to, Kim Hannon, who is the former chair of the Health Committee, he'll tell you the health problem. I'm sure that Carl Marcelino will tell you the educational problem. He's the represents parts of Nassau and Suffolk in the Senate. And they'll all tell you about their individual areas, and that's why we have so many problems. Everybody says, I know there's a deficit, but we have to look out for this, that, and the other thing. That is not the way to manage a budget in the recession. Let's just remember one thing, John. The state ran out of money in December. The state went broke in December. And what I did, because the legislature did not properly close the deficit that I brought them back to special session to close, is I had to delay payments to schools, to local governments, and to service providers until January when the revenues came in. And what I got for my trouble
was
a
lawsuit. You got sued, Governor. Exactly. You got sued.
I got a lawsuit. And really, only a few of the legislators supported the action I took. The rest of them supported the lawsuit. Well, if we had done things by not holding back payments, delaying payments as we did, we would have paid all our debts until the money ran out, and then the state would be flat broke and bankrupt. So what I'm saying is people are justifiably angry. They're upset that we're having to go through this tough period. But if we don't go through this tough period, the situation will be worse. And I only point to the 36 states that have had to delay payments. Some have laid off and furloughed workers. Others have canceled early childhood education and pre-kindergarten programs. 36 states combined have done that. New York hasn't had to do that yet.
And other states have issued IOUs. Is there a threat of that?
California is issuing IOUs. Oregon and Arizona will be next.
But is that ever a possibility for New York?
Listen, if we keep managing this badly, everything is a possibility for New York. California's not cutting anymore. They're gutting. They're closing hospitals and schools, not cutting them. And it's almost like in the morning when you hear the traffic report, so you know which roads to avoid and what would be the best route to your destination. Well, here's the economic traffic report. If we don't tighten our belts and these legislators who are complaining about what's unacceptable don't realize that the ramifications, if we don't take tough actions right now, will be so immense compared to the problems that we have now, that we will wind up where California is. they would give anything to go back 3 or 4 years and be where New York was at that analogous time.
Let's take you back to your State of the State speech for a second. You really came out swinging there, calling for the toughest ethics reform in history. Legislature came up with a plan. You called it too weak. And earlier this month, you said, and I quote, "We must bring fundamental change to the culture of Planet Albany." Governor, what are you looking for? What needs to exist in ethics reform for New York that doesn't exist right now?
Well, there's one principle that I will not negotiate on. I have already offered the legislature another plan. I took the term limits out, and I took the campaign financing part of it out. But the one thing I can't take out is when you have a commission that examines your conduct, you can't be appointing the people to the commission. It would be like going and getting your neighbor to sit on a case that you have in criminal court. And the reality is that there has to be independence. We have to bring back the public trust in their government, and we think that's the best way to do it. And the reason that I made ethics such a hallmark in my State of the State address is I have an ethical dispute with the legislature, not a political one. I told them in October that we would have a $3.2 billion budget deficit. I was right on target. They all said I misestimated the revenues or I did it for political reasons. They returned to me $500 million short of what I needed, and then borrowed $400 million from the 2010 stimulus money to pay the 2009's problems. In other words, they wouldn't pay their debts. And what happened to us is what happens to anyone that doesn't pay their debts. The day of reckoning came. We couldn't pay our bills at the end of December. We had to delay them. Do they even acknowledge that I asked the legislature for permission to close the budget myself? They wouldn't grant it to me. So what I really, in the end, had to do was close it myself anyway and risk a lawsuit, which I got, which they dropped at a certain point. But what I'm saying is these are ethical issues. You have a duty. You took an oath. You have to cut the deficit. Is it popular? No, it's not popular. But it's not popular during December to perhaps hold back toys for Christmas. But sometimes the choice is toys for Christmas or pay the rent, and the responsible parents know what to do. It doesn't make them popular, but you're still living in the house in January.
And you're listening to WRHU. We're speaking with New York Governor David Paterson. Governor, what has been your biggest success since you've held this office?
I would say my biggest success is turning around the minority and women-owned business program, which was yielding women and African Americans and Hispanics 5% of the state procurement when they were actually 44% of the pre-approved companies that had met all the requirements, met the threshold test but couldn't get any business. Or I would say our ability to start executing the cleanup of brownfields all around the state. Half of New York City and all of Buffalo's abandoned property are on brownfields. Very dangerous environmental problem and also a severe economic problem as well. And I would probably say our work on mortgage foreclosure, introducing the first piece of legislation that defines what a housing loan is and ascribes criminal penalties to those who engage in predatory lending. I'd say those are 3 accomplishments I'm pretty proud of.
Okay, now the flip side, if you could press that restart button and start all over again back to March of 2008, what would you do differently?
You know, it's probably something you wouldn't think of. What I would have done differently is I would have taken more time in reorganizing the governor's staff. Obviously, many people in the staff were appointed mostly by the previous governor. Some of them were very hurt and thrown off by his departure and probably wanted to depart themselves, and I asked them to stay, and they did their best. But this, was a different time, and I think sometimes you just have to stop and organize the group around you. That's one thing I definitely would have done differently. One thing I would have done differently is I would have appointed a United States Senator sooner than I did. But that's almost anachronistic because had I appointed a U.S. Senator sooner than I did to replace Hillary Clinton, that appointment would have come while Hillary Clinton was still Senator. And if for some reason she had continued to serve as Senator, it would have been difficult for me, because I would now have made about 20 people unhappy that they weren't chosen, and one person really unhappy because they were chosen and never got to serve.
You're making this announcement Saturday at 9:30 right here at Hofstra. Why Hofstra? I mean, we're not complaining. We're very happy to have you, Governor. But why here and why on Long Island for this announcement?
Well, because, John, you probably don't know this, but Hofstra is basically where my education started and where it ended. I mean, hopefully I've learned some things since I left Hofstra Law School.
Hopefully,
but the reality is that I went to the Little Red Train Nursery School on Jerusalem Avenue, which is still there, and it's stone's throw away from Hofstra Law School. So I thought this was the first class I ever went to was at Hofstra. Also, when I was in Hempstead High School in Long Island, I used to come over and take a class with a friend of mine from Hempstead High School at Hofstra College when we were, I think, freshmen or sophomores in high school. So it was always a kind of, a place that I remembered fondly, and thought that'd be a good place to kick off the campaign.
And it will be kicked off this Saturday, February 20th, 2010. Of course, if you'd like to attend the event, you have to RSVP. It's governorpaterson2010.com/events. Governor, before we let you go, anything else you want to tell us?
Well, I would just like to say that the whole Long Island region has had a real problem during this recession, housing issues, and also the issue of job creation. And we will be very mindful of that as we go into new administration, and we'll make it a priority. I just wanted to assure everyone of that.
All right, Governor David Paterson. Governor, please join us again throughout the campaign.
Well, thank you, John. It's great to talk to you.